All right, good evening, folks. Good evening, folks. This is your host with the most, the guy with the plan. My name is Travis, and I am Oscar Mike Radio. Oscar Mike Radio is heard on the Hubazoo Network. Find out more on hubazoo.com. And this is episode 109. 109 episodes. It's really great. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm really pleased to be joined by another military brother and friend and fellow podcaster, Ben Biddick. He is the host of Get Up Nation podcast, which is a really cool podcast. You should definitely have that in your playlist. Ben, welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here, Travis. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy. You've got a lot going on, and you seem to be moving all the time. Just as a synopsis, you certainly had a lot of experience, and I wanted to start with your military experience. Now, according to my notes, you were at the University of Wisconsin. Are you a Wisconsin native?
Pretty much, yeah. I was born in the Midwest, and I spent most of my childhood in Wisconsin. Yep.
Well, I love that state. I've been through there several times, up in the Eau Claire Legion.
Oh, yeah.
With my family.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful country. And then you joined the Army. What did you do in the Army?
I did a variety of things. I did basically whenever they said, who wants training, my hand was always up. So I started out, I went in with an MOS of being a combat medic. For some reason, I think it was they were trying to get so many people during that part of the global war on terror through that they sent my group, and usually they don't send, I guess, people with medical MOSs to Fort Benning, Georgia. Usually that's, home of the infantry, but for whatever reason, I got sent to Fort Benning, Georgia. I was really happy that I got to do basic training there. I wanted the real experience. I wanted nothing that was less than an intense experience to prepare me. I knew that we were probably going to wind up in combat at some point because of the op tempo and the way things were going during the global war on terror. So I did my basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. Went to Fort Sam Houston in Texas for my medical training, and then and so I got the combat medic training. I later got to do some advanced medical training where they actually got us into a nursing program. And that was at Fort Lewis, Washington. And I also later became a military policeman. We were a combat support military police unit that I joined. I started out as their medic, but when they were booting doors and clearing rooms and doing all sorts of things like that, I wanted in, and they wanted me to be able to wear two hats. So jumped on that. I did that training in Kentucky, Fort Knox. And then later on, I was on orders at the state headquarters, so we were doing emergency management. I was at the Joint Operations Center, and we were wherever local infrastructure got overwhelmed, we could deploy units to help them in a civilian environment to make sure that people were safe and out of harm's way. And if there was a disaster of any kind, then we could help deploy resources and assets to help our citizens. So basically, that's a down and dirty of that. I did a tour in Iraq with the military police unit, and we were mostly out of the Bayat Baghdad area. Got to do some interesting things at Taji, and went up to Mosul a little bit, and around the southern region of Iraq mostly, to Crit. We kind of traveled around. We were doing detainee air transfers. We were helping gather biometric data off of people in the theater internment facilities. So basically fingerprints and DNA stuff of terrorists. If they ever showed up on our soil, they'd be in a database that law enforcement resources in the United States could recognize the fact that if there was a guy driving a U-Haul in Ohio, and it might be somewhat suspicious if he was convicted of terrorism and bomb making and the global war on terror. So did a variety of things. That we went around and evaluated Iraqi prisons to make sure they met humane treatment standards from the United Nations, the United Nations humane treatment standards. So we would go around and make sure that prisoners there were not overcrowded, that they were getting medical care, that they were being fed, that they were not being harmed, things like that. So that's, I guess, the basics of some of the things that I did in the military. So
you had a very varied experience. So, my next question is, I'm listening to your podcast and I'm understanding what that's about. We'll get into that in a second. But where did this idea come from? Because it seems like after the military, you really went into, I wouldn't say a different direction, but you didn't do the normal thing that a lot of veterans in your space did, going into law enforcement, going into being a first responder or a private contractor. You did something that, in my view, is something I don't come across very often. So I was wondering if you talk about your transition and how you kind of got into this whole thing of this message of Get Up Nation.
Okay, and just to be clear, I kind of did initially. So right after I got done, and I'm sorry, I know I've done a lot of different things, and it's not, there isn't a ton of it that's documented right now or anything, but basically I did some first responder work after I got out of the military. It was a nice transition to still being a somewhat tactical role. So it wasn't immediately into the Get Up Nation side of things, but so I did do some first responder stuff as a crisis negotiator and worked with helping to stop things like human trafficking, stopped the process of young people being groomed and seasoned into exploitation or into gang involvement. So I did some of that for a few years after my military career. And then I did some medical work too in the civilian side, where I was working with dementia patients, elderly, psychiatric needs. Did some mentorship of young kids with challenges and coming from troubled environments in a non first responder capacity. So I kind of have done a lot of that stuff. But then, as you were saying, I made the transition over. I'd always been interested in writing, and I had done some ghostwriting for some people along these lines. But at the same time, when I had gone to college, I realized quickly as we kind of came to the end of my college degree, they kind of wanted you to write a book and complete all your writing training by culminating it into a piece of, a book, I guess, basically. And at that point, I quickly realized I knew nothing about the world. I knew nothing about people. I knew nothing worth talking about. And so anything I was going to write was going to be complete pompous garbage. So I dropped out of college, moved to California, started working. Soon after that, 9/11 happened. And then I joined the military. My brother worked in New York. He worked in the building across from the World Trade Towers. So that morning I got a call. I got a call. He's like, "Hey, I'm okay. I got to go. Turn your TV on." And then that was 9/11. So soon after that, so he survived that. And so that obviously put a spin on what my plans were. And then that led to me joining the Army. But so after all of that, I kind of made that transition. I wanted to go see things, experience things, learn things. That I figured if I was ever going to write or do something creative in that space or create things that would really serve people, that would really be of value to people, well, I needed to know what people were. I needed to know what they were experiencing. I needed to know what ripped them up and tore them apart and what built them up and what made them strong. So I figured if I could figure those things out and focus on those things, then I could really be someone who lived a life of service, who did something hopefully of quality with my life, and that when the day comes when we pass on from here, that I could look back with a sense of pride or with a sense of satisfaction in knowing that I didn't take this lightly. I didn't take it cheaply. I didn't take it for granted and tried to make the most of it. Now, certainly I'm not, certainly that's the hope and that's the goal. So that's what I try to do every day. That's what I aspire to. And that quickly led to, after these lessons that I learned, after serving people, after seeing them in all these kinds of environments and listening to them and hearing them tell their stories, then it became time when I felt ready to start to contribute. I felt that I'd learned enough to at least contribute something that I felt would be of quality, that I could be proud of, that would build people up. So about that time, then I had an associate connection. He's a veteran himself, Marine Corps veteran, combat veteran. His name is Nick Bennis. Then he and I reconnected, and he told me about Adam Greenberg and how Adam Greenberg was looking to tell his story. Needed a writer for it, and we did some interviews, and things clicked with that. And then I secured that project where I was able to have the honor of helping Adam tell his story. And I'm not sure if our listeners are familiar with Adam, but Adam was a professional baseball player. He grew up in Guilford, Connecticut, and has a very, very unique story in the history of Major League Baseball. So that was an honor to tell his story and speak with some baseball legends. And that's where the book happened. And then quickly following that, then I started the podcast. So
that episode was the first episode I heard of Get Up Nation podcast. And one of the things, I'm listening to this and I'm looking at what you do. And I was kind of taken aback because, again, most of the veterans I deal with are strictly, law enforcement types, or they're the big, and nothing wrong with this. This is not, don't wish you get their panties in a wad. But they're moto guys. They're rah-rah guys, and they got the beards going, and the operator sunglasses, and the beat-up baseball cap, and they're got their tactical khakis on, and their operator. And they're ready to kick butt and take names at all times. Where your message, especially with what happened to that gentleman, and I'll have the link to that podcast in the Oscar Mike Radio blog post, listeners, because you got to listen to it. Your podcast is a message of empowerment and positivity. And I have to ask, was that something that you set out to do when you started this podcast, or is that something you kind of grew into? Because it's actually a very refreshing perspective on life, because we hear so much about PTSD and problems and challenges that I think there's a disconnect between people who are actually overcoming their adversity.
In setting out to do the podcast, it was very intentional of this approach to things. There's a lot of volatility in the world. There is a lot of negativity. People are really siloed into things based on our circumstances, the way we do media today, the way we do, the way that businesses are set up, the way that politics are done today. It's very divisive, and we get real siloed. We say, I'm this, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I'm a whatever it is. I'm this, I'm that. I wear the shirt. I talk about it. I share them on my social media, the stuff that my little pocket or my cell, says about the world, and I put it out there. And there's a lot of people making a lot of noise, but there's very, very little emphasis on the fact that we all have a lot of similarities also. And so people that we can get real divisive. We can really attack the hell out of each other very easily. I mean, part of my transition out of the military, and part of trying to find mental health for myself, et cetera, is, and what I think is very important, especially as we deal with, post-traumatic stress, and not just the veteran community, but in the first responder community, and in our families. There's so much of the family structures where things are very challenging and troubling to people as they're trying to make a dollar, or trying to raise their kids. They're trying to do it in a way where kids develop a sense of self-esteem, but we have intergenerational conflicts. So we have baby boomers saying how millennials are, entitled and pathetic. And then we have millennials, lashing out at Generation X and baby boomers saying, well, you created a world where we're getting massacred in our schools. We have all of this division and divisiveness, and truly all of us have so much common ground and so much power when we realize that, okay, we don't have to be against each other. If we talk this out in a rational way, and we look at basically supply, or not supply and demand, but consequences. So if we look at our circumstances and what they create, and we don't like what we find, well, let's create what is the end goal of what we want. And basically what I think all Americans, or all people in any society, want is that the beautiful thing of freedom. They want freedom. They want security, And when we have that basic level of security, then, as they say in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need security first before you can build on all the other brilliant things that make life so worth living, that make life so brilliant and beautiful. And it takes you all the way up to self-actualization, where what I think our founding fathers of our country and founding mothers, the women and men who created our country, wanted was basically a place of life, liberty, and happiness. And you can't have life if you're not secure. So I love, as you and I both love the operators, the special forces operations guys, the grunts on the ground, the guys that put in work, that boot indoors in the middle of the night, and they say, and when taken into custody terrorists or get in a firefight and destroy the enemy, where organizations like ISIS would try to obliterate us, would try to, end our way of life because they are completely exploited, fear-based, frightened people who have reverted to hatred and violence to try to inflict their mentality on the world, which is completely self-defeating for them as well, and largely a product of just poverty and isolation and being manipulated by people who are masterminds at manipulation and making something very dark happen out of desperation. So, and the opposite is true, in my opinion, in the United States, where we may not practice it very well. And I'm looking very forward to getting our country more in line with a sense of valuing every life that comes here. Like, I think that every life that is welcomed upon the earth should be celebrated, welcomed, honored, and raised with the ultimate amount of respect and esteem and understanding the sacredness of life. And I think everyone should have that. I don't think there should ever be in the United States any place that's referred to as a ghetto or an inner city. I think that those things are shameful to us, that those things even exist, where we would allow poverty. And I'm not saying the government, I'm saying how people reacting with each other. I'm not saying any of this regard to government. I'm not making any statements about capitalism or socialism or any of the hot topics that people are talking about in the media today. I'm talking about just people helping people. You go, you get yours, you in a secure environment, thanks to those who do raids in the middle of the night, who do halo drops, who do halo drops in the middle of the sky, come down, kick tail and foreign sands so that war doesn't come to our sands over here in the United States, so that we can live in that safe and secure environment. And I understand those men should be, and women, women in combat arms, these warriors who are going out there to make our country safe. I think there is so much more that can be done on the civilian side, where civilians, where we as American people, especially as veterans who come out of the military and into the civilian community, there's so much common ground that we have, and we do a disservice to everyone is experiencing a lack of what could be by not recognizing the value of each person in each place, in each role. And if we get caught up in vitriol and rhetoric and put it on whatever news channel you're talking about, here's the Republican guy, here's the liberal guy, they attack each other, and then we get nowhere. And then is that really what we want for our media? How about we say, okay, this is the challenge. What is the solution to that challenge? And instead of just talking smack about each other all day long, we could maybe focus on the challenges, address how we make that better, more brilliant America, where people are helping people as they go out and get theirs. So instead of just taking the mentality, I'm going to go get mine, and I don't care what happens to anybody else, that we see that leads to destruction in business, that leads to dissatisfaction in employees, because it's a pretty mercenary type situation if it's all about making a bottom dollar. Well, what about these businesses and organizations that do make money, and at the same time they help create a healthy environment, they help create environments where people love coming to work, they create that environment where people have a sense of life, liberty, and happiness regardless of their skin color or whatever category that we put people into. Just say, we are all people. We all want this brilliant, beautiful life that America the framework of America was built to give us. And whether it's military veteran or civilian it's finding those common ground in service of others. I know tons of people who never served in the military, but they started their own nonprofit because they care about something. They care about dolphins, or they care about or they care about people in poverty, or they care about exploited children. They don't want kids to ever experience the horror of being trafficked, or the horror of being exploited by gang members who will say, I'll take your desperation, and you know what? I'll paint a nice picture. I'll talk about making you a man, but at the same time, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to destroy you by involving you in negative circumstances. I'm going to channel you towards incarceration or being murdered yourself. Instead, how about this? We say, hey, young people, hey, you're looking to be a man? Well, let me tell you about the experiences I had as I grew up, as I faced adversity, as I overcame adversity, and I didn't let that adversity turn me into a bitter, isolated cynic. Instead, every adversity that I experienced, it has turned into something that's made me more connected with others. It's made me more powerful because I can speak into the pain of others, and I can draw them out of that isolated place where, in those dark moments where we're drowning ourselves in alcohol or substances, and we put a gun in our mouth and we wonder if we have the strength to pull the trigger. How about we do it much different way, where all of the adversity that we're facing, we realize that we're all in this together. We realize that we had some amazing thought leaders at the creation of this nation, and that we have an entire nation, not that we have an entire nation of people that is built upon the idea that we want to make the most out of this life, that we want to experience the glory of living, that we want to share that with others. And there's really no reason why that can't happen unless we just simply allow ourselves to live at a lesser standard. If we allow ourselves to, when that hate starts coming up, to not address where that came from, and instead turn our enemies into friends. Instead, we can challenge those that we disagree with, and they can challenge us, and we can maybe learn something from each other. So all these different silos that we're living in, we can maybe break down the walls a little bit, and we could create a brilliant space where, when that flag flies, where our friends died our friends died for this, for an America, this nation, this dream. Our friends died for this. And our friends are still dying in isolation and with suicide, and as they're reeling oftentimes with the effects of going into combat environments and seeing awful things that people do to each other and experiencing those things. And so if our friends gave their lives for us, for this nation, on Saving Private Ryan, it kind of echoes in my head a lot where, Captain Miller is saying, I hope this, Private Ryan, he invents a longer lasting light bulb or something, because it's like they're going through all of this to give this guy life, right? To save this guy. All his brothers are dead. And they're trying to bring one of them home to his mother, to his father. They're trying to bring him home. And, and they're looking at this character, and they're saying, this guy better not be some weak, pathetic soldier who's we better not do all this for this guy. This guy better be something else, man. This guy better be coming hard. He better be, on point. He better be, an earner. He better be somebody worth fighting for like this. And so I think we all are that. And I think those of us who have survived the global war on terror, whether you're a civilian in New York City, or whether you're a soldier, a Marine, an airman, a sailor, or somebody who served in the Coast Guard, or in any of these capacities, I think we're all looking at each other and saying, look, what is all this for? It's not for an America that can't get anything done politically. It's not for an America where we're just all fighting with each other and calling each other names. It's for an America where each person is valued, where upon their birth and upon their death and upon every day of their life, they live with life, liberty, and happiness. They give, they grow, they're powerful, they're intelligent, and they're wise. And so what I'm really excited about is I think people are catching on to this. This is what I'm trying to do with the podcast, is to say there's nothing we can't accomplish. The only thing that gets in our way is to not have vision. The only thing that gets in the way is to see each other as opponents all the time, or adversaries. Why can't we just say, if somebody challenges us, I'm going to take those lessons. And I may not agree in the end, but you know what? If they challenge me, I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to let that make me better. I'm going to let that make me wiser. And in the end, those people that we may have an intense animosity for currently, they may become a powerful ally. They may not, but they may be somebody who has challenged us to live a more wiser, more aware, more awakened life to the reality. And then we can create a reality where we can just feast upon all the glory and that this life is, that this nation is, and then we can honor those who gave this opportunity to us. I just think we have a huge mantle on our shoulders that these people that we all have friends who have died in service, in combat, and to honor them is to live a life that is so full and pure and true and powerful, that then we will truly honor that sacrifice. And that's kind of my mentality. That's kind of what I go for on the podcast.
One of the things about every one of your guests that I picked up listening to your podcast that have in common is they had something happen to them.
Yep.
And they came to a point in their life or dealing with this challenge where they had a choice.
Right.
They could take a fork in the road. One fork was the self-loathing, the self-pity,
Yep.
I'm going to embrace weakness. The other fork is I'm going to make a choice right now to use everything at my disposal to make the best of the situation and possibly overcome this challenge, for lack of a better term, like a boss.
Yeah, man.
And it seems like when I started figuring that out and understanding what they were doing, wouldn't you say, Ben, that for many of us, it's simply we are our own barrier, and that your podcast kind of shows that if you can make the choice to carry on and persevere versus
right.
quitting?
Absolutely, 100%. I think largely people don't overcome their challenges because they don't have a voice there that says, hey, other people have had this happen to them too. And do you know what's possible if you get past this? Like a lot of times we just people have in their lives, maybe they don't have a support network or they don't have that voice or they don't even know that it's a possibility that, okay, this happened to me, but I don't have to become a bitter, cynical, hateful person about it. This actually can become a power base for me. This actually can become the catalyst for me to connect with people and to achieve things that I've never even dreamed of. And so that's what I want the Get Up Nation podcast ultimately to be, is a voice for people to really understand, like, we've had a number, and it's any, like you said, it's anything. It's the one thing is certain is that everyone will have adversity in their life. And I think it's a very, maybe not sad, but maybe a poor, like a poverty, like an internal poverty, if we just try to live our lives in a way where we just hide from adversity, like, oh, I hope nothing goes wrong today. And you get so focused on then you get fixated on all the things that go wrong. And then you become a very negative person and a very fearful person. And then you never experience the glory of conquering anything. Then it's always, oh, my boss, he won't do this, or he's a piece of garbage, or he's a chauvinist, or this lady at work, she always talks, all these little things that people get caught up in, and it's this self-defeatedness and this fear of actually putting yourself out there, this fear of saying, well, I just have to live an existence where I just try to hide, and I hope I don't somehow get cancer one day, and I hope I don't do this, and I hope I don't. It's a very weak and powerless reality that I think perverts people. It makes them less than what they could be. It makes them small. And so I don't think anybody wants to live that way. And maybe it's just because they don't have the vision. Maybe because they never had a parent that. And it doesn't have to be a parent. It can be just another influence in their life of, why would anybody allow themselves to live in fear? It's because they don't know the power of what comes when you refuse to be driven by fear, when you don't know the pleasure of being driven by your passion, by something that you love. For instance, I talked just yesterday with the amazing Marsha L. She was born with a congenital birth defect of her leg. It led to her leg being amputated. For 23 years, she never wore shorts. She lived this life where she was very ashamed of herself because she felt like she certainly was different than the kids that she was going to school with, and they would tease her and call her names and do hurtful things. And And more recently, then she decided, I'm not going to live in fear. And she went to a camp where she got out of her isolation, went to a camp during her teen years where she saw people who were like her facing similar challenges. And so in being awakened to the fact that, okay, I'm not alone in this, and there are other people facing this, and they have these experiences, then becomes ultra powerful, because then she started to awaken to the fact of, I'm not something broken. I'm not something that's odd. I'm not something that needs to be ashamed. I am a human being with gifts and talents and so much. And she started making music, and her music is amazing. I would recommend anybody check out Marsha L. She's on iTunes. She has an album called Brave, but she talked about how these people began to invest in her, and they began to say, I want you to come and be a part of this. And she said, I'm not going to let them down. I'm not going to lose the fact I love to make music. I love to be, and she started to feel that joy of being alive and connected, and the intoxication of not being afraid and of not being ashamed. And then just to piggyback on that, with the opioid epidemic, so much with addiction is based on shame, right? So if we get people out from under these places of shame, these places of guilt, these places of fear, then they open up into these brilliant people. And Marsha L., then she never wore shorts until she was 23 years old, right? Because she had a prosthetic. And then with a lack of fear, she went out, she did a photo shoot in her bathing suit. She had never been to the beach. She lived in Florida her whole life, other than Haiti when she was born. She came to the United States to receive medical treatment when she was 5. And she said, you know what? I'm tired of being afraid. I'm not going to be ashamed. I'm not going to live that life. And here I am with my prosthetic. I'm on the beach and I'm wearing a bathing suit for the first time, and I'm going to capture it in a photo shoot. And then all of a sudden she has all this positive energy pour out to her. Jada Pinkett Smith is sharing her post on Instagram, and she's making this brilliant music that says, you know what? I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be ashamed. And so when we take on that mentality, no matter what it is, whether it's being born with or being an amputee, whether it's having an addiction, whether it's we've been diagnosed with cancer, or you got fired from your job, or you screwed up your marriage, or you drink too much, or you're dealing with the results of trauma from your childhood and exploitation, whether it's trying to shed illegal activity that you were involved with because you were trying to seek out the affection and attention of a male authority figure in your life because you never had a father, so you joined a gang, or whatever it is, whether it's autism, all of these things that are happening. I just want to be part of the conversation and a part of the dialogue that elevates us out of where we are now and into the brilliant reality of what's coming, because it's always darkest before the dawn. And so there is coming a dawn to this nation that it is going to be an unprecedented wave of positivity and power and growth, that what we see today is it's not going to be like this forever. Feelings and emotions, they surface and then they drift. And our thoughts, our minds bounce around, and we have 70,000 thoughts a day. And thoughts, they come and they go, and we don't need to allow ourselves to be afraid. We don't need to live a life of fear. We don't need to live a life without vision or passion. And when we find something that we love and lock into it, and we know that we have value, and say, I love to do this, and my life has value, and I'm here for a short time, and I'm going to lock into what I love, and I'm going to do some good, and I'm going to help somebody. And the suffering that I've had, it only makes me more powerful because I can identify that suffering in others. I can see it. I can taste it. And by doing that, I can alleviate it, and I can walk people out of that pain. So I think that type of America is worthy of our fallen sacrifices, to create that in real time. I think that would give them satisfaction in knowing that they died for an America like that.
Well, one of the things that resonates with me in your podcast and your message and what you're trying to do, and I'll have the link to the Get Up Nation podcast website and all the links where you can hear the podcast. But one of the things about the whole entire concept that I really love, Ben, is you don't have to be in the military to get this. You don't have to have served. Well, on the other hand, you can be, let's just say, this woman who I don't know, I've never heard her music, but I could listen to your story, like the baseball player, and I can immediately relate to certain aspects of that struggle. And I think
Right.
that's what really, ladies and gentlemen, puts this podcast on a must listen to, schedule. I'll be, for me, I'm gonna just get personal for a second. I'll be either grinding through a training workout, or I'll be studying for, certification exam or anything, and I'll put the headphones on, pop your podcast in. I hear about some of these challenges people have come over, and I'm like, well, the first thing I think is, well, they had it harder than me. And then I'm like, well, in certain ways, I've had it harder than them, but at the same time,
Yep.
I think it goes back to what you mentioned before, is we're all in this together. But by them sharing on this platform, and then being willing to let you tell the story, it gives me a little extra motivation to kick in and grind a little harder. And
Good.
that's where it's different. Is this will lift you up if you let it and buy into it. And I just think it's very, very cool in a time where there's so much focus on tearing people
Well,
down.
I'm honored by your statements there. I'm honored that that's doing that for you. That's the goal. I hope that does that for others. I certainly am not perfect, but my goal is to create that for people, and I'm doing my very best to do that. So I'm honored that that's being achieved, and I hope that others have a similar experience as they tune into that.
Do you like the whole podcast experience? Do you find this medium really working for you? Is this allowing you to create and build something that's yours? The reason I ask is a lot of podcasters get bogged down. A lot of podcasters, get burnt out, and very few of them over time actually stay with it. But it seems like you have really honed your craft, and you've got your sweet spot of where you want to be. And it's just
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm really happy with it now. There'll be more media here that's coming. That's going to. There's more coming here, and as far as the podcast goes, I'm really happy with it. I like the podcasting because, first of all, I talk to people who I admire every day, like yourself. I'm honored that you came onto the show and shared what you're doing with Oscar Mike Radio. That was awesome having you as a guest. So to meet people like you who care about veterans, who care about creating things of meaning and substance and support for people, and speaking about these issues and raising awareness and doing good things. That's very satisfying to me, to perform the podcast development and to create that network of people who are having that positive experience. So that's very engaging to me. But what I also like about the podcast is, it's very one-sided. All you got to do is, whether it's, 'cause we're on YouTube, we're on Acast, we're on Overcast, we're on iTunes, we're on all these different Spreaker and all iHeartRadio. We're on all these different formats. So all people have to do is go in and download it and listen to it or stream it. And so it's very passive. So if they are afraid, if they are ashamed, if they are frightened by something that they're dealing with, if they are dealing with something internally, it's much more, they feel much more vulnerable to go to something in person, right? To a group, or to ask for help, or to connect with somebody. A lot of people have a lot of social anxiety. There's a lot of fear today. In society, people are not connecting and being social in a lot of ways that they have in the past. So if people are kind of entrenched or isolated, they can all they got to do is hit a few buttons, and then they're in it. And I hope that will help draw them out. It will give them hope. It will show them what amazing people are doing in this country to overcome challenges, to partner together, to find that vein of gold that where they can safely encounter some media, they can safely take it in, receive it, hopefully sense some fire of inspiration there, and that can help lead them to people who are doing positive things, where they can safely interact, where they can make themselves a little more vulnerable as they become more comfortable. And hopefully that's why I love the podcast, is because it's that safe place where they don't necessarily have to, show up at a place, take the time in their busy schedule to be nervous about meeting new people and meet somebody who may be frightening to them, or they may not like the environment or anything like that. All I got to do is hit a few buttons and they're already in. And then on their timetable, when they are ready, then they can reach out to others. They can become part of Get Up Nation. They can subscribe you can go on getupnationpodcast.com. We have a subscription there where it's free, and you just put in your email address, and then soon here we're going to be sending out just ways for people to network, people's experiences, sharing those experiences. So when they're ready, and when they have that trust built up, when they experience these people kind of vicariously and experience people who are trustworthy, who are people of character and people who care about others, then hopefully they can, when they're ready, reach out and connect and start to have social networks that are a little more satisfying for them. And it could all start with that podcast. So that's what I like about it.
Well, Ben, it has been an absolute blast. Time has flown, and I'm having fun, and I just really appreciate how candid you were in communicating, what Get Up Nation is all about and what you want not only for your podcast, but also for people in general. It's
right.
Not just a marketing ploy or a gimmick or a resume item.
Yeah.
You really have this passion for seeing people enjoy life to the fullest, and that's through a positive change and positive actions. And again, the website is Get Up Nation Podcast, correct?
Yep, getupnationpodcast.com. That can, and you can just search, if you just do Get Up Nation Podcast on Google, that'll hook you up. We're on a variety of different formats. So if people prefer iHeartRadio or Spreaker or whatever it is, we're trying to make it available in pretty much any platform possible so that people can take it in at their convenience and at their comfort level. So
as we close down, ladies and gentlemen, I think what I got out of my experience being on Ben's podcast and also having been on is, Ben, what I would take out of this right now is I have the choice to either react to life and act to life in a positive manner. It doesn't mean I'm a pushover or I get walked on, but I can take what's thrown at me and react in a way that puts that negativity behind me and embraces what's good out of it, so I can be an example to others and have the best possible life for myself.
That's absolutely correct. And that is correct in saying that it doesn't make you weak. In fact, it makes you the opposite, because when your opponent or somebody who's trying to make less of you or trying to harm you or sabotage you or send you into a place of, or just keep you in a place of shame and fear and doubt, the most powerful thing you can do in that point is persevere. And the most powerful thing you can do is keep showing up. So like the weight, Travis, that you push, there's so many people who can't find it for themselves. And so they just put their crap on other people. And so it becomes very frightening to them who are living in fear when you refuse to be in that fear, when you refuse to have that weight on your shoulder that they try to put on you to keep you less than what you are and what you can be. And so to be that perseverant person, it's the ultimate power to say, you can harm me and you can hurt me, but you can't kill me, and you can't stop me from doing something brilliant, powerful, and connected with others. And when you do that, then those people then they're confronted with a choice, and they have to choose: am I going to ally myself with somebody this powerful and this impressive and this beautiful and this potent, and get out from the shame and fear within myself so that I stop putting this on other people? Or am I going to go back into my hole of shame, into my hole of fear? And so when we confront each other in this kind of peaceful way, it forces us to make those decisions, and I think it creates a much more powerful and beautiful America and world. So I appreciate the opportunity of being on your show, Travis. You're the man, and I really loved having you on my show. And I look forward to lots of good things ahead as we serve others together.
All right, folks. First of all, Ben, thanks so much for coming on and taking time out of your day to talk to me. Really appreciated it and thoroughly enjoyed it. Learned a lot. Folks, if you're not doing this already, get to the Get Up Nation, because that's where it's at. That's where it's up. And go to getupnationpodcast.com to find out more. Ben is everywhere. He's going to be everywhere. And I just can't wait to see what he's doing next. So, again, thank you very much, Ben. This is Travis. We are Oscar Mike Radio, and we